Hi everyone, so taking a look at our next class here, this is going to be Osteichthyes. So the defining characteristics of this class is going to be jawed fish that have bony skeletons. So again, we are still in the fish category here, the marine fish. So some different things that we've seen with other classes before is jawless fish, and then we also saw jawed fish with cartilage skeletons. So here the Osteichthyes are just slightly different. So these are going to be jawed fish that have bony skeletons. They also are going to have a swim bladder, and this is going to help with buoyancy. So remember that cartilage skeleton was really important to keep those fish light. And here, since bones are slightly heavier than cartilage, the swim bladder is going to help with these fish buoyancy. And then finally, our last defining characteristic is going to be scales. All fish in this class are going to have scales used for protection and streamlining in the water. So examples of this class is going to be what you're most familiar with in the fish category. So some examples here could be cod, flounder, tuna, salmon, mackerel, all these just very familiar types of fish here, ones that we usually eat, are all going to be examples of Osteichthyes. So that's really the end of our marine fish categories. The next class that we are going to be talking about here is our class Reptilia. So here are some defining characteristics here. It is going to be cold-blooded animals, so that means they do not regulate their own body temperature, that the environment is going to dictate their temperature. They're going to have leathery skin with scales. They're going to lay eggs. And most are going to breathe air, so instead of seeing those gills component, we're going to see lungs here. But in very rare cases, we're going to see some absorbing oxygen from the water through their skin, which is a really unique adaptation. But for the most part, we are going to see air breathers using those lungs. And again, cold-blooded, leathery skin, and they are going to lay eggs. So there are a couple different types of examples of this class, and I want to go into some specific detail here. So the examples that we're going to go into a little bit more detail here are going to be turtles, saltwater crocodiles, sea snakes, and the marine iguana. So let's take a look a little bit at sea turtles. So sea turtles, there are only about 7 species left, so these are an endangered species here. So it's really important, there's a lot of different protections around sea turtles. But something very interesting about them is like similar to the sharks that we talked about. These have not evolved in almost 110 million years. So very similar to the sharks here, have not evolved in many, many years. And again, another thing that's similar to these sharks about their evolution is that when 110 million years ago, our sea turtles were much, much larger in the ocean. They have evolved to be a little bit smaller. But again, another living fossil here. We're also going to see the shell of our sea turtle is going to be called a carapace, and that is going to be nice and streamlined for going through the water. Really interesting fact here is some turtles, land turtles specifically, are able to move their head and legs inside their shell for protection. But if you take a look at our sea turtle here, their skin is directly attached to their carapace. So they are actually not able to retract their head and legs into their shell like other turtles can. So that's another interesting fact about sea turtles here. Again, you can see that skin directly attached to our carapace. So it's kind of a part of their body. And then finally, they're going to migrate for feeding and nesting. So sometimes up to 1,400 miles to nest versus their feeding grounds. A few more interesting facts about sea turtles is about their diving. So sea turtles can dive for about 5 hours. And remember, these are air breathers, so that means they can hold their breath for up to 5 hours. That seems like an extremely long amount of time. So how they're actually going to be able to do that is they actually slow their heart rate down to conserve oxygen. So as we know, every time our heart beats, we're moving oxygen throughout our body, taking it from our lungs. So when they slow their heart rate, it actually allows them to keep a lot more oxygen in their lungs. So some turtles can go up to 9 minutes between heartbeats. So what that means is your sea turtle's heart only beats once in 9 minutes. So if we take a comparison, a normal human will have their heart beat about 70 to 90 times in 1 minute. So that's substantially different than what we're used to with mammals and air breathers here. So the next animal we're going to talk about here is going to be saltwater crocodiles. These animals can get up to 17 feet in length and up to 1,000 pounds. So very, very large animals here. And according to our map, we are going to see them in this like Indonesian, Australian area. And they can live up to 70 years. So a very long living animal here with our saltwater crocodiles. Next, we can see our sea snakes. Again, we see our air breathers, so they are using lungs to breathe. They live in tropical waters in those Indo-Pacific, so kind of similar to our saltwater crocodile habitat. There are 32 species of sea snakes, and they are all venomous, so very dangerous creatures here. They have nice flattened tails used for swimming. We did see them a little bit in our video when we were talking about shallow seas and coral reefs. So that's another example that we saw there. And then another cool defining feature is that they have valves that can cover their nostrils when they're swimming underwater. So this allows them again to hold their breath as they're diving for their food. So again, taking a look here, we can see here with our snake, we have a nice flat tail, which is going to help them move through that water. And again, we do see most of their habitat in the coral reef diving for their food. And then finally, the last reptilia class that we're going to take a look at is the marine iguana. So these animals are only found on the Galapagos Islands off of South America. They are about 4 to 5 feet in length and only live about 5 to 12 years. So in the idea of animals here, that's a pretty short timeline for most of our reptiles. They're also herbivores and have a really interesting evolution. So these marine iguanas are one of the animals that Darwin actually studied in his trips to the Galapagos Islands. So if you're interested in that type of evolution, I would really encourage you to go back and take a look at the discoveries made with these different animals here. Some more interesting facts here. So marine iguanas are going to consume large amounts of salt while eating saltwater algae. Remember, they are herbivores, so eating those photosynthetic animals here, or plants, protists. And they are going to have this specialized sweat gland to sneeze out the salt of their noses. So it's a pretty interesting adaptation that these animals have. So they've adapted to that really salty diet by being able to sneeze the salt out of their noses. I do encourage you, if you would like to look a little bit deeper into these marine iguanas, to take a look at this YouTube video. If you have any more questions, please let me know, and I'll see you next time.